This all happened back when I was in college, living in this dumpy little town in upstate New York. Place was basically dead, except for the college, obviously. Anyway, there was this abandoned school, like literally a block from my apartment. Big old brick building, windows all boarded up, the whole 9 yards. Creepy as hell, especially at night. Naturally, being a bored college student with an overactive imagination, I got curious. Started looking into the place, Googling its history and stuff. Turns out, it had been shut down for decades. Something about asbestos or lead paint. I can't remember exactly, but the weird thing was, people kept talking about seeing lights on at the building at night and hearing noises, like children laughing. I know, sounds like every other creepy abandoned building story, right? But hear me out. One day, I'm walking past the school and I notice something different. There's writing on one of the chalkboards, like actual fresh writing. I kid you not, it looked like someone had just been in there, teaching a class or something. It was just basic math problems, but still, it freaked me out. I mean, the place was supposed to be completely sealed up. I told my roommate about it and he was all, "Dude, you gotta go back there and take pictures." So, like an idiot, I did. Went back the next day, camera in hand, and sure enough, there was more writing. Different chalkboard this time, some history stuff about the American Revolution. And that's when I noticed it. The date on the board, it was the current date. Okay, now I'm officially spooked. I mean, there's no way someone's getting in there, right? The windows are boarded up, the doors are chained shut, I even checked the back. It was all overgrown with weeds and stuff. There's literally no way in. But the chalkboards kept changing. Every day, new writing, new subjects. Sometimes it was math, sometimes history, sometimes it was just weird stuff. Like once there was a whole board filled with what looked like sheet music, but it wasn't any notation I recognized, but I'm no expert, so I guess I don't know. Another time there were these weird symbols, almost like hieroglyphs. I tried taking pictures, but they always came out blurry, like the camera couldn't focus. This went on for weeks, and I swear it was like an obsession. I had to go by the school every day just to see what was on the boards. I even started trying to decipher the weird symbols, but no luck. It was like they were some kind of code. Then things started to get personal. One day when I was looking through the windows, there was written in big bold letters across the chalkboard, my name. Just my name. No message, no nothing, just my name. Alright, that was my breaking point. I noped the hell out of there. I mean, that's some straight up horror movie stuff, right? I told my roommate I wasn't going back and he agreed wholeheartedly. We even started taking a different route to campus just to avoid the school altogether. But things didn't stop escalating there. A few nights later I woke up to this scratching sound, like nails on a chalkboard, but coming from inside my apartment. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, and listened. It was definitely coming from the living room, or at least that direction. I grabbed my phone, using the flashlight to peek into the hallway. Nothing. Just the usual shadows and the faint glow of the streetlight outside. I told myself it was probably the radiator or something, but the scratching continued, getting louder, more insistent. I couldn't take it anymore. I crept towards the living room, phone clutched in my sweaty hand. The scratching stopped the second I reached the doorway. I flicked on the light, and that's when I saw it. Dust. Fine white dust coating everything in the living room. The coffee table, the couch, the TV, it was everywhere. And on the wall above the TV, someone had written a single word in the dust. Listen. Okay, now I was freaking out. I mean, what the actual hell? Was someone in my apartment? Had they been there the whole time, watching me sleep? I checked the locks, the windows, everything. No sign of forced entry, no footprints in the dust. It was like it had just appeared. I spent the rest of the night huddled in my bed, phone in hand, ready to call the cops at the slightest sound, but nothing happened. The next morning, the dust was gone, vanished without a trace. I tried to rationalize it, told myself it was just a prank, or maybe I was sleepwalking, or it was a vivid dream. I didn't know. But deep down, I knew it was connected to the school. Whatever was in there, it had followed me home. Things kept escalating after that. I'd find objects moved around my apartment, things disappearing and reappearing in different places. I started hearing whispers, faint voices just on the edge of hearing, calling my name. I couldn't sleep, couldn't concentrate on my studies. I was a wreck. Then came the final straw. I was in the shower, trying to relax, when I heard it again. That scratching sound. But this time, it was in the bathroom with me. I spun around, heart in my throat, and there it was. Written on the steamed-up shower door was a single word: join. That was it. I grabbed the towel, threw on some clothes, and got the hell out of there. I didn't even pack a bag, just left everything and ran. I crashed at my roommate's place for a few weeks until I could find a new apartment, miles away from that damn school. I never went back, never even drove past that street again. But to this day, I can't shake the feeling that whatever was in that school, whatever wrote those messages, it's still out there, and it still wants me to join its class. So, a few years ago, maybe 5-ish, I was living in this tiny town in Vermont. Seriously, you blink and you miss it. Population 300, if that. Anyway, there wasn't much to do, obviously, especially for a teenager, so my friends and I were always looking for ways to entertain ourselves. One night, we were hanging out at Mark's place, bored out of our skulls, and someone brought up the old orphanage. Now, this orphanage had been abandoned for decades. It was this huge, rambling Victorian mansion on the outskirts of town, all overgrown with weeds and shrouded in these creepy-ass trees. Locals had all sorts of stories about it. Kids hearing voices, shadows moving in the windows, the usual spooky stuff. Of course, we'd all heard the stories, but none of us had ever actually been there. So, of course, we had to check it out. It was a clear summer night. Stars were out, crickets chirping, the kind of night that seems peaceful until it isn't. We piled into Mark's beat-up pickup truck and headed out to the edge of town. The road leading up to the orphanage was dirt, all potholed and barely visible in the moonlight. We were all joking around, trying to act tough, but there was some noticeable tension in the air. We parked a little way down the road, not wanting to get stuck in the driveway or, have someone see us. We crept up the overgrown path to the house, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. The place was even creepier up close. The windows were boarded up, paint was peeling, the whole place just had this aura, like something bad had happened there. We circled around the house trying to find a way in. Eventually, we found a window with some rotten wood around the frame. Mark, being the biggest of us, managed to pry it open for us to squeeze through. The inside was, it was what you would expect, honestly. Dust everywhere, cobwebs hanging from the ceiling, musty smell of decay. We were shining our lights around, checking out the rooms. There were old beds with rusted frames, broken toys scattered on the floor, even some faded drawings on the walls. It was honestly more sad than creepy, seeing all this evidence of these kids who'd lived there just left behind. We made our way upstairs, the floorboards creaking under our weight. There was this long hallway with doors leading off to what were probably the bedrooms. We were poking around in the rooms, finding more of the same, old clothes, broken furniture, that kind of thing. Then we got to the last room at the end of the hall. The door was slightly ajar, and we could see that there was a rocking chair in the middle of the room, just rocking back and forth, gently, as if someone had just gotten up from it. We froze. I swear my heart stopped beating for a second. We all just stared at that rocking chair, half wondering if we were in some kind of a horror movie. No one wanted to be the first to move. Finally, Mark, again, ever the brave one, took a step forward and pushed the door open. The rocking stopped abruptly. We rushed into the room, shining our lights everywhere, but there was nothing there. Just the rocking chair, now still, and the rest of the dusty, empty room. We checked the closet, under the bed, nothing. There was no way anyone could have gotten out of that room without us seeing them. The only window was boarded shut. It was impossible. Needless to say, we got out of that room and that house pretty damn quick after that. Back in the truck, we were all buzzing with adrenaline, trying to explain what we'd seen. Was it the wind? A draft? Some kind of trick of the light? But the window was closed, and the rocking was so deliberate. We never went back to that orphanage, and honestly, I'm not sure I want to know what was in that room with us. Sometimes it's better not to know. But here's the thing that really freaks me out. A few weeks later, I was at the library doing some research for a school project. I was looking through some old local history books, and I came across a section on the orphanage. There was a picture of the building, and I recognized it immediately. But underneath that picture, there was a caption. It said something like, "Orphanage, abandoned, 1957. Fire claimed the lives of several children." And then I saw it. In the picture, in one of the upstairs windows, that very same room, there was a faint figure. Child, I think, just standing there, looking out. I shut the book. That's enough studying for today. I still think about that night sometimes, and that rocking chair, and the figure in the window. Maybe it was all just our imaginations running wild. We were kids. Maybe the rocking chair was just some weird trick of the wind. But what if it wasn't? Okay, so this happened about a year ago. I was still in college, and like a lot of college kids, I was broke. So when the opportunity came up to make some quick cash, I tended to jump on it. There was this abandoned daycare center on the edge of town. I'm talking like way out in the boonies. The owner had passed away a couple of years prior, and the family was getting around to selling the property. They needed someone to clear the place out, and they were paying a decent hourly rate. Seemed easy enough, right? Wrong. So wrong. The first day I show up with my buddy Mark. He's a big dude, ex-football player, so I figured if anything weird went down, he'd have my back. The place was unsettling, to say the least. Overgrown weeds, peeling paint, rusted play equipment, standard abandoned building fare. But there was something else in the air. It felt heavy, like something was watching us. We get the keys from the realtor, this nervous lady who practically threw them at us and sped off. She mentioned something about kids getting spooked, but she seemed the anxious type, so I didn't think much of it. We were there to work, not listen to ghost stories. Inside, the place was even worse. Dust everywhere, cobwebs thick as curtains, and the smell. It was this weird mix of sour milk, disinfectant, and something else. Something almost metallic. But the creepiest thing? By far the toys. There were toys everywhere. Dolls, stuffed animals, these plastic building blocks, all just scattered around like the kids had just dropped them and walked away. Some of the dolls were even positioned in these weird, unnatural poses, like they were watching you. It was seriously freaky. Mark, being the tough guy, just laughed it off. "Kids probably just left him," he said. "Place has been abandoned for years, nobody's touched him." But I could tell he was a little unnerved too. We started in the main playroom, just tossing stuff into garbage bags. Broken toys, old books, that kind of thing. It was slow going, and the atmosphere was getting to me. Every time I turned around, I felt like those dolls were staring at me, their painted eyes following my every move. Then we found the basement. The door was hidden behind a bookshelf, almost like someone had tried to conceal it. Mark pulled the shelf aside, and this wave of cold, stale air hit us. It was like opening a fridge, and that smell, that metallic smell, was even stronger down there. We flipped the light switch, but nothing happened. Of course, power was out. Mark pulled out his phone flashlight, and we started down the creaky wooden steps. The basement was basically one big open room with concrete floors and walls. It was mostly empty except for a few old boxes and a rocking horse, just sitting there in the middle of the room, rocking back and forth slightly, even though there was no breeze. I swear I felt my heart jump into my throat. I turned to Mark and I could see the fear in his eyes. He was shining the light around the room, but his hand was shaking. "Let's get out of here," I whispered. All he had to do was nod, and we practically ran back up the stairs, slammed that basement door shut, and pushed the bookshelf back in front of it. Must have been there for a reason. Neither of us said a word. We just grabbed our stuff and got the hell out of there. Couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, like something in that basement, something attached to that rocking horse, was now aware of us. The drive back to town was tense. Mark kept checking the rearview mirror, and I swear I saw something move in the back seat a couple times, even though we were the only ones in the car. I dropped Mark off at his place, and he practically jumped out of the car before I even came to a complete stop. Mumbled something about needing a drink and disappeared inside. I didn't blame him. As I was driving home, the feeling of being watched intensified. I kept glancing in that rearview mirror, expecting to see a pair of glowing eyes staring back at me. The hair on the back of my neck was standing on end. Then it happened. I was approaching a sharp bend in the road when I heard a sound from the back seat, a soft, childlike giggle. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding on the gravel. My heart was pounding in my chest. I slowly turned my head, my eyes scanning the back seat. Empty. But then there it was. In the rearview mirror, reflected in the darkness behind me, was a small figure. It was a child, maybe 4 or 5 years old, with pale skin and dark, empty eyes. It was smiling at me, a chilling, unnatural grin that stretched across its face. I screamed, slamming my foot on the gas pedal. The car lurched forward and I sped away, not daring to look back. I didn't stop driving until I reached the brightly lit streets of town. Needless to say, I never went back. I didn't even tell the realtor about what I saw. Who would believe me? I just left town a few weeks later, eager to put as much distance between myself and that place as possible. Even now, years later, I still cannot shake that memory. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone in the dark, I hear that soft, chilling giggle again, whispering in my ear. Eventually, we found a window. Eventually, we found a window with some. What the fuck is with this line? Eventually, we